You're all probably familiar with the Tyre Nichols body cam footage release and um, all the discourse that surrounded it. Uh, After doing this for 4 years, I'm finding it difficult to come up with new ways of talking about how much I hate the police. Though in this case, there's kind of a specific angle to the situation that makes it, I guess, a little bit more worthy of looking into. So, a bunch of people on YouTube, I'm sure, are going over the extent of the violence that was inflicted. Tyre Nichols? Not Tyre? Is it Tyre or Tyree? Tyree. That makes more sense. Yeah, Tyree. That makes more sense. Did I not say Tyree? Tyree? Yeah, Tyree. Yeah, okay. Thank you. The emotes. Cracker moment? That's true. This is an edited, cut together bit of body cam footage from Tay Zonday. That's the Chocolate Rain Man of Fame, where things are pulled together for clarity. I encourage anyone who's interested in looking into this to find the footage and look at it in its entirety. Unfortunately, there's really not that much of value to look at here for two reasons. First of all, the footage is unimaginably cruel. And second of all, I genuinely don't even know if I can show it on YouTube. Really, I don't. I would test the limits of the platform, giving it a shot. They're just murdering him. That's it. It's not, there's no ambiguity. There's no, oh, maybe it's this or that. He was attacked, harassed, beleaguered by one set of cops who he fled from, and then another group of cops came over and beat him to death. There was no ambiguity at all. Completely straightforward. That's it, really. It went on for a while. There's just I could look at it and say, hey, this is bad while it happens. You're gonna have to find it yourself. You can. It's been posted on YouTube, and videos covering it have 100K plus views. Yeah, trust me. Stuff being posted on YouTube does not mean it's safe to post on YouTube. You know, there's naked yoga on YouTube, but if I flashed 3 minutes of pussy on screen, I'd probably get in trouble for that too. Not worth the risk, and also not worth the analysis. It was bad. If you want a summary of the situation in the most in the most neutral language they can muster. Officers tased, pepper sprayed, and brutally beat 29-year-old Tyre Nichols during a January 7th traffic stop. The footage split into 4 videos. Police can be heard yelling at him to get out of his car and forcibly removing him from the car. The video has been described by law enforcement and attorneys for Nichols' family as absolutely appalling, alarming, and unconscionable. It's so bad that the governor denounced it, didn't they? Or was it the mayor? Videos show officers kicking Nichols at least twice in the face, striking him at least 3 to 4 times with a baton in the upper body area, punching him at least 4 times the face, punching him at least 2 more times the upper body area, and kicking him at least twice in the abdomen. First video is around 11 minutes, goes on for a while. The second video, about 30 minutes long, is taken from a Skycop camera at Castlegate and Bear Creek Lane. 2 officers violently pushing him to the ground as he tries to turn over. Then a third officer appears to kick him multiple times in the face. They beat him to death. Yeah, not much to it beyond that. What I do want to talk about, Memphis police officer calls Tyre Nichols beating fun. What's that? Oh, well, hold your horses. And get me in trouble here. What did I just say?
My hell. My brother. I just re-opened my shit back up, bro. My leg, bro. My knee.
I'm very sorry, but I wasn't able to make very much from that clip. We can hear that? Yeah, I know. We can hear the audio? I know. There's sound? Really? Is there sound in what I was listening to? He's saying my shit is burning because of the pepper spray. Not that was fun. I couldn't even make out what he was saying there. Stop with the links. I want to talk about this. Opinion. The police who killed Tyree Nichols were black, but they might still have been driven by racism. From End Wokeness, how is this not satire? 58K likes, 5.6 million views. I want to talk about that. It's a white man, the resident expert on what is or is not racist. Okay? They don't get it? Yeah. So, there are a couple of angles you can take this from. I do find it noteworthy, and this keeps cropping up over and over and over again, that conservatives are very capable of understanding self-hate within a demographic group, as long as it's only within dominant power groups. So conservatives will accuse male feminists of being self-hating men, and conservatives will accuse like white lefties of being like self-hating for being white, like white guilt types. I hear this all the time from conservatives. But when you suggest that black people might be able to be racist against other black people, all of a sudden it's just incomprehensible to them. Makes no sense. Absolutely not. It's like, what? What? You're telling me what? It makes no sense to them. It's beyond their comprehension. But that's an obvious point to make. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the systemic side of things, because the systems in place that lead to this being a problem, that lead to bias against black people in the criminal justice system with police and what have you, that lead to brutality against them, these systems are depersonalized and systemic by nature. They're not they're not an expression of interpersonal bias. Interpersonal bias can play into it, but I'd ask you, here's a question, okay? Now, if we're back in the 1930s, in the Jim Crow South, in a very black area, right? Let's say somebody there suffers an injury, and after that injury is suffered, the hospital is called to try and bring him an ambulance to carry him away. But it takes ages for them to get there because the area they're in is, a very underserved black community, very poor, very rural. There are other rural areas that are poor around the country that have closer access to medical care, and it's pretty undeniable that the reason why it takes a while for them to get any kind of systemic help is because it's a black area. If that man dies, did he die of racism? Was racism a factor in his death? Assuming, maybe not guaranteed, but at least systemically, probabilistically, there's a decent chance that if he was white and in a white area, that he would have been able to get care in time. I think it's fair to say that. See, this is one of the issues with systemic analysis. It's very rarely do you get to apply these denunciations to case-by-case situations, right? So, for example, violence against women. Violence against women is bad, unless they're already hitting you, I guess. I don't know. Play it by ear, okay? Be responsible, fellas. Don't go crazy. Now, violence against women is often considered to be kind of like a specific category because most violence, of course, is in between men. If we're talking about assaults and murders and what have you, we have violence against women in a kind of implied they didn't deserve it category, which is not always the case, but often is. When we're talking about violence against women, we're not talking about like a 50-50 coin flip on whether the woman was like doing some violence herself and deserved it or whatever, or was being defended against. It's pretty straightforward in a lot of cases, but not in every case. If you have a domestic dispute which leads to a violence against a woman, how often can you fairly claim that the violence done against her was a product of misogyny or chauvinism? Like, I think we normally kind of agree that wife beaters are misogynistic, but we know that's not like necessarily the case, right? You could conceive a situation where a person is violent in a way which is completely impartial to the gender of like they could be a generally anger prone person and they have a wife, so the wife is around them and thus the predominant victim of their abuse, but it's not like a necessarily gendered thing in the way it presents or represents. Yeah, they could be gay and have a male partner and act the same way in terms of their violent tendencies. So is that misogynistic, that specific instance? Well, probably not interpersonally. But when we talk about violence against women broadly, we are talking about misogyny, aren't we? This is the problem with talking about any kind of broad social trend, where you have systems that might contribute disproportionately to certain outcomes, but getting an analysis on what everyone was thinking, feeling, believing in any specific situation, and then seeing if it applies there, that's a lot harder than the broad analysis. The reason I'm harping on about this is because I want to make it perfectly clear that this situation right here, the death of Tyree, was a racism issue. Even if not one of these 5 men is a self-hating black guy, even if not 1 in 5 is like, it harbors some kind of like implicit bias. And mind you, there's a decent chance they do. Survivorship bias is pretty common in black people who make it out of the ghetto. And I have noticed that a lot of those black people have some often very condescending attitudes towards black people who stay in the ghetto because they grew out of it and they remember all the bad days they had in the ghetto and they think, well, I was able to get out of it. So those other folk who didn't, well, that means that they're the bad ones, you know? And some of them cozy on up to white people who say they're one of the good ones because they got out of that situation, and so on and so on. So in ways you can have a kind of like internalized self-hatred or a survivorship bias that manifests as racism. Oh, immigrants do this all the time. That's true, Holic Master. But I say it again, even if this was not the case for any of these 5, even if the cruelty and violence of these 5 guys right here was entirely like a race neutral thing, there's like, it could have been anyone, you know, there's nothing here that is specifically about their race or the race of Tyree. I still think you can fairly say that this situation was a product of racism. And that's the case for systemic and demographic reasons, you know? The situation in which we live today, with regards to our criminal justice system and the way our police behave, is one shaped fundamentally by racism, you know? They talk about how the origins of police in America, you can trace them all the way back to slave patrols that would, slave catchers, who would patrol the edges of the Mason-Dixon line or any state that had slavery and try to catch people running away so they could sell them for ransom back or just bring them back, you know, to the plantation they ran away from. And then you move forward a little bit and whoa, you know, back in the early 20th century, you know, we have something that kind of looks like police in New York and Chicago and Philadelphia, but not exactly. Oftentimes, they're basically just a hired gang that works for the mayor or any number of civic-minded institutions. For a while, police were just a kind of colloquial local gang that represented the interests of the electorate. You know, they weren't they weren't like a standardized, institutionalized force like Gangs of New York. Like Gangs of New York. I mean, you can imagine it kind of like the difference between having a police department with its own set of laws, regulations that are both state and federally, like, you know, controlled, and having the mayor literally just have like a side department, you know? You would literally have police, and they were just like the guys, you know what I mean? Like you'd have the mayor, and mayors back in Philadelphia in like 1908 or whatever were insanely corrupt for the most part, you know, and you know, Tammany Hall shit. And then you would have like the mayor would have Du Bois, you know, in a room right next to them. Hey, yeah, your boy. Hey, yeah, Lenny and Du Bois. I hear some of those picketers are causing trouble up down the street. I hear these union workers are planning some kind of protest. Tell them how bad that'd be for them. Hey, Lenny. Hey, go. It sounds like a joke, but unironically, that is actually they were the goon squad. Exactly, they were the goon squad. They were gooning before it even became a kink. Can you believe it? Over time, this got more institutionalized. But one of the biggest jobs of the police have always been maintaining class and social distinctions. So, keeping poor people out of wealthy people's neighborhoods, keeping black people out of white people's neighborhoods. This has always been a big part of what the police do and have done. Even if it's not officially in the rule book as to what they do, the police are ultimately subject to systems that benefit them, and wealthy people are far more powerful when it comes to both their voice and their monetary contributions to local government, meaning the police have a greater incentive to help them out. Because white people historically and contemporarily are wealthier and have much more hereditary wealth than black people, it means that there is much more of a sort of demographic incentive to protect their interests. And what this means is that redlining, that is to say, the practice of sort of cordoning different ethnic and racial groups into different parts of the city, often by banks selectively denying loans and mortgages based on where they wanted to set up shop and have a house. Redlining was not just a product of zoning laws and bank bias, it was also directly enforced by the police. The police made an active effort to do this and still do to this day. You all ever seen this? This was done right before I was born. Hold on. National Guard, LA riots, Beverly Hills. In the famous LA riots after the murder of Rodney King by police, you know, the city basically just erupted into flame. A lot of wacky stuff happened in Los Angeles, you know? And when the National Guard finally arrived, you know, one of the things they did, one of the things they prioritized was forming a perimeter to block off Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills had a lot of wealthy people in it, see. They didn't mind letting the riot burn on in some parts of the city where black people lived, where Koreans lived. But Beverly Hills, they did mind. They didn't want anything too terrible going on down there. So they blocked that area off. They allowed black people to riot, to fight with Koreans, to be subject to state violence, to be cordoned and controlled, but only in the right area. Only in the Fortnite battle bus drop zone, you see. The National Guard formed a blue danger zone that's sort of enclosed around certain parts of Los Angeles. Yeah, where are we dropping, boys? Koreatown, as it turned out. I was looking for a good picture. I couldn't find the one I was thinking of. There's a famous photo of them blocking off a part of Beverly Hills. I think you can see the sign right next to them. I wasn't able to find it with some cursory Google searching. Bad time for LA. The point I'm getting at is that the situation we're in today is kind of inextricably linked to the history of racism, and for that reason, the reason our police are the way they are, even if they're acting in ways that are not individually racist, are definitely affected by that history of racism. Let's say you have a white police officer murdering a white person, like one of those times an autistic white guy gets shot because, you know, the cop will be like, okay, you know, like perfectly recite, do the gritty. I don't know, do the Fortnite L dance, keep on tempo. Oh, you missed a beat, you know, like that. I think it's fair to say that was probably not motivated by anti-white racism on the part of the white cop, maybe, but I'm guessing not. However, the reason our police are so militarized, so jumpy, so paranoid and fearful is in large part because they see their role as occupying dangerous territory. And the reason why the occupation of our dangerous cities is so racialized is because after white flight, following World War II, after white people left industry in inner city areas and went out to suburbs that they alone were given because black people were not allowed to benefit from the GI Bill, our inner city areas became those poor, dangerous, racialized areas that police considered their occupation of to be just that, an occupation, not citizen police officers working to protect their fellow city dwellers, but rather out-of-towners going into downtown in order to police them directly. And the attitudes that our police have developed as a product of these historical and demographic trends directly affects why they're the way they are today. You think it's a coincidence American police are so violent? Why they specifically dress up like riot cops all the time, no matter what's happening? Why they specifically are so jumpy? Why they specifically kill so many more people than other than other police precincts and departments? Part of it is the fact that, yes, we do have a lot more guns here in the States, which means there's going to be a bias towards the threat of mutual firearm violence, you know? But a lot of it is also, the fact that police are operating on trends that have been popularized based on racism and its effects in this country. That makes sense? I feel like that tracks. I feel like that's understandable. So, these guys here, were they interpersonally racist in the sense of they have a diminutive or condescending or paternalistic attitude towards other black people as a product of their personal experiences? Maybe. It's not impossible. But I think you can fairly claim that racism had a lot to do with what happened here with the murder of Tyree, whether or not that's the case. You just can't extract that from this system. How would you go about explaining all this to conservatives, though? Well, I'd start with finger puppets, for one. Sorry, I know that was a bit more talky than a lot of people's coverage of this. I know a lot of people are just, they're showing you the footage and they're going, look at how bad that was. But y'all know how bad this was, don't you? I mean, not to say there's nothing worthwhile about reminding yourself of the capacity police officers have for cruelty, but I think that element of the subject has been covered. I wanted to talk about this.